Hello dear learners, you're very welcome for today's session. This is our practical session of hand hygiene. Having looked at the theory bit of all of it, we looked at different types of hand hygiene where we saw the routine and the surgical hand washing. We looked at all the equipments we need per specific type of hand washing. So we are here basically for our practical bit of that. So this is our hand washing environment. As you can see, it is the hand washing area. We are having a sink with water on. Okay, remember we said we have to be having a tap with running water. Then we have our soap, preferably which is liquid soap, the one we are going to use during hand hygiene. We have flannels here, or the hand towels for drying hands after washing. Then we have also this bowl, a stainless bowl for receiving. They use the flannels. So we are going to start with the routine hand washing, and these are the basics that we need as our requirements. Hopefully you remember the steps we looked at in our theory part of it. So we are going to be following those very steps, but keep it in your mind that we are supposed to use 5 strokes per step. Okay, at least 5 strokes per step as we are performing all these procedures, all these types of hand hygiene. So we are going to start off with our routine hand washing. Okay, as you can see me, I've already put on my apron, my plastic apron. So I'm here to perform routine hand hygiene. Okay, so we said we start by opening the tap to let the water flow steadily. Okay, and you have to be standing closer to the tap or to the sink. Make sure that the water is not at a high speed to splash over you. Okay, it has to be steadily running. Then next we are going to wet our hands. Then after wetting our hands, we are going to apply a reasonable amount of liquid soap. And we are going to start with our steps we looked at theoretically. That is, we start with palm to palm. Remember, we are interested in forming the lather, okay? So we shall do this 5 times. Then next we are going to rub my left dorsum with my right palm. Then vice versa, you do the same for the other hand. Palm to palm, fingers interlaced. Rotational rubbing of back of fingers to opposing palm. And vice versa. Rotational rubbing of the left thumb clasped in the right palm. You do the same for the opposite hand. Rotational rubbing of tips of fingers to opposing palm, rotationally. So keep it in your mind that your fingernails have to be short as mine, or if not, you can have a nail brush to scrub beneath the fingernails. So lastly, we are going to do rotational rubbing of the wrists. And remember, as we are performing all these steps, you have to rub beside this running water, because you can't perform it directly under running water. You're going to end up washing out all the lather before you complete thorough rubbing of the palms and fingers. So lastly, we are going to dry our hands, not rinsing our hands rather. And after rinsing, I'll use a flannel to dry my hands. Okay. So you make sure you dry the hands so well, and also in between the fingers, such that if at all you're going to maybe wear some gloves, they don't disturb you. If you don't dry your hand thoroughly, you're going to end up tearing gloves. So as you can see, the tap I'm having, it is not an elbow tap, neither is it a foot tap or a sensor tap. So I'm going to use this flannel here to close this tap, not using the bare hands. Why? We said Initially, we used the bare hands to open the tap and our hands were contaminated, but we don't want to contaminate them, okay, after hand hygiene. So you don't want to use these hands directly to touch that valve. So what I will do, I use this flannel I've used for drying or a paper towel to close that tap. Then after, you discard appropriately where it is supposed to go. So that is all about the routine hand hygiene, okay? So next we are going to look at the surgical hand washing. We saw some key things different in the surgical hand hygiene. One, we saw that we need sterile hand towels. So for this time, we shall not need these flannels, but we shall need sterile hand towels. So we are having some sterile hand towel in this tray here. So we shall need sterile towels, till the liquid soap we shall use, the tap, and where we shall discard the used flannel after using, or the used hand towel. Remember, we said, as you can see, our flannels we are using are reusable. Okay, they are not disposable ones. So after using them, eventually they are washed. And if they are these the sterile hand towels, they can be washed, then sterilized for reuse. Then for the flannels for the routine hand washing, they are just washed, dried, and ironed for reuse. So for surgical hand washing, we shall instead use sterile hand towels. Then the other thing we saw so special about the surgical hand washing is that when we are raising our hands, we are starting from the elbow. When we are wetting our hands, we start from the elbow level downwards, okay? So we wet our hands from the elbow level downwards. Our hands have to be facing downwards. Why? We believe that our hands at that moment, they are very contaminated, So we don't want to let all the dirt and the germs from our hands to be flowing to the cleaner areas. We believe these upper arms are cleaner than the fingers. So as we are wetting our hands initially, we are going to make sure that our fingers are pointing downwards, okay? Then the other thing which is so special about surgical hand washing is so that we perform the rubbing of the hands twice, or the procedure twice, okay? So we are going to initially perform as the routine, and then for the second time, we shall repeat the same procedure, but the second time, rubbing up to the elbow level. When we reach rubbing of the wrists, we shall rub up to the elbow level, okay? Then the other thing which is special about the surgical hand washing, afterwards, after the whole procedure, we have to keep the hands pointing upwards. Why? At that time, we believe that now our hands are thoroughly clean, okay, and they are cleaner than the upper arms. So even in rinsing, we shall say that we are going to rinse when we have put our fingers pointing upwards, because at that time they are more cleaner than the arms, as we saw initially that they were very contaminated, but this time round they'll be more clean than the upper arms. So we shall have to rinse in that direction. So now we are going to start off with our procedure. Those are some of the highlights I wanted to remind you of. So we are going to start as before, opening our tap. Then we have said we are going to wet our hands, but from the elbow level, okay? And the hands have to be facing downwards, because this time round we believe the hands are more contaminated than the arms. So next, you apply your liquid soap. So for this time round, I'm not going to be speaking out the steps. Just follow. So as I said, if you're having long fingernails, you're supposed to have a nail brush, or you first cut them off before you start the procedure to make sure that you remove all the dirt beneath your fingernails. So this is our first round. So we shall rinse. So the first round is the same as the routine. So we shall do the rinsing, but at this step, we are not going to dry our hands, okay? But we are going to reapply soap, and we repeat the procedure for the second time, okay? But for this time, when we reach the wrist, rubbing of the wrists, we are going to rub up to the elbow level, okay? So you put reasonable amount of soap, then you start rubbing. So for this time, you're going to rub up to the elbow level. Okay. So now you can go ahead and rinse, but we said for rinsing, now the fingers are more clean, so they will have to point upwards as you're rinsing off the lather or the soap. And you're supposed to keep them higher after washing them. They are now very clean, okay? And as I told you, you're not supposed to close that tap with your bare hands. So what am I going to do for this case? I'm kindly requesting my assistant, please, you come and help me close this tap. Yes, so I will start drying my hands up to the wrist. Then pick another corner, dry the back of the fingers. You have to be so keen to dry even in between the fingers. Then I will dry up to the elbow level. Okay. Then you pick another corner. You do the same for the opposite hand. Dry in between fingers so well up to the wrist. Get the remaining corner, put it behind the fingers, dry in between the fingers so well, and then up to the elbow level. You have to make sure that your hands are thoroughly dry. Why? If you don't dry them so well, you're going to end up tearing glass. Okay? So after, we said we have to keep hands above. So I'm now going to discard off this used towel in the other bowl, but my fingers are above. So you just throw it in that bowl. You keep your hands pointing upwards. So now here I can proceed and maybe go and put on surgical gloves. Now my hands are washed surgically and they are very clean and sterile. Okay. So now I can go and put on surgical gloves if at all I'm going to handle a surgical procedure or I'm going to prepare for a surgical procedure. Thank you very much for your attention. So this marks the end of this session. I kindly urge you to do more practice about hand hygiene, both the routine and the surgical hand hygiene. Thank you so much for your time.